But anyway, first question from Gotham asks, are Dortmund in trouble? Is it a coaching problem or just poor personnel? How can they improve their offense? We talked last week about boring Dortmund. Was it last week? I think it was last week, wasn't it? And then Manu, we also did the midweek show on them getting absolutely spanked off Manchester City. Having just watched Manchester City demolish Liverpool, I think that makes Dortmund look a little bit better, because I'd say Dortmund put a better fight up than Liverpool did, and God knows how much money Liverpool spent in the summer. But I'll come to you first, Manu. You might not have had a chance to watch this game, obviously, because you've been in Berlin doing a lot of media work and stuff. But yeah, it's been it's kind of, it feels like this result was a long time coming. You know, we kind of praised Dortmund for having a good start to the season. They look very professional, but it's now been quite a while now that we've been kind of complaining about the lack of imagination from Kovac, his maybe over-reliance on Guirassy, which hasn't really worked out, and, you know, against the Haas foul side, who are obviously desperate for any sort of points. They came up short, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I did watch this game on, I was sitting next to Dan Whiten, friend of the show from AFP, and the professional he is, he always has a second screen with him where he runs the conference, which on your means no one else has internet, but that's a different story. But so I had an eye on that, and then of course, a lot of people were quite happy with how they did. The neutrals were quite happy on how things were progressing, because Bayern Munich were set to lose points, and of course Dortmund would have maybe come a little bit closer in the standings. And then, of course, Königsdorfer scores a very late equalizer, a 90-plus second minute. Great story for him, because he was on the verge of leaving the club in the summer, right? Ended up staying because he failed the medical at Nice, I think it was.
Yeah.
And
he
so,
also hadn't scored this season until then.
Yeah, on top of that. So, but it is, we praised Dortmund for how defensively solid they have been, and how boring the football was. We criticized that, or we actually said that is a marker for Kovac football, and it will get you results more often than not. You can't ride your luck forever on just winning games 1-0. I think this is what caught up to them in this moment. All it takes sometimes is a late lucky punch equalizer, and I think that's what happened here. Are they in trouble? I wouldn't go that far. I mean, the Man City game it's kind of stands on its own. This game was very frustrating. I know Nico Schlotterbeck had some candid words. He's actually here in Berlin as well. He was at the NFL game, so briefly saw him. But he had some candid words about the match and the lack of creativity. We had that issue, of course, in the past with Mats Hummels and Edin Terzic, right? So that makes, I think, a few alarm bells ring. But we mentioned it, the creativity in the attack is struggling, and I think that's because there's players up front who just are not informed. And until that changes, I think Kovac is going to be very limited of what he can get out of the side.
Yeah, Matt, we talked about it last week in terms of maybe, in fact, no, it wasn't last week. I think it was the bonus show we did after the Man City game, and we talked about how Kovac really seems to be struggling with options right now. And considering his obviously intentions with the club and his ambitions, and the fact that, as Man and I both agreed, he's probably done a good job of getting the most out of this team, considering who he replaced and the improvements he's made there. You look at the fact that he's kind of turned to some backups in this game. Emre Can, who I thought was at fault for the goal, personally. Joe Bellingham kind of came into the team, who I didn't think played particularly well. Fabian Gross as well in the middle of the park. Okay, Chukwuemeka comes in, scores a great goal. I think he's looked quite bright when he's came on as a substitute in matches, but he's obviously sticking with guys like Guirassy, Maximilian Bayer, even like Svensson and Rierson, who I think both look really tired in recent weeks. He's sticking with these guys because he doesn't really have any options, isn't he, Matt? That feels to me like the fundamental issue here.
I think one issue is certainly starting lineups. If there has been a pattern in recent games, it's been Dortmund being better in second halves of games. Obviously Bayern Munich away and even Manchester City away spring to mind. Although you can argue in the second case that City sort of maybe took the foot off the gas a little bit in the second half, which allowed Dortmund to generate a bit more of at least an impression of improvement. I thought the changes that you made to the starting 11 for Hamburg on Saturday, I don't think they worked. Okay, in terms of Chukwuemeka gets the goal, okay, I'll accept that one. Although I've not been convinced with him throughout the rest of the season either. On the other hand, starting Gross and Bellingham as that midfield two, I think that was I'm guessing it's the first time that particular pairing has started together, I would guess, although may need to be corrected there. Don't think it worked particularly well. I feel like he's playing particularly Pascal Gross in all sorts of positions. He was good in the second half away at Bayern in a more advanced role, but then sometimes he's being played in a more defensive role, protecting the back four. So that all seems a bit unclear. So I feel like that's an issue for them. Lack of form, you mentioned. Adeyemi would be the one to highlight there in particular. Had a really good sort of start to the season and into September, but the past month he's definitely dropped off a little bit. I think I'm right in saying that the Chukwuemeka goal against Hamburg was their only shot on target. Dortmund, think that's correct. So that that's absolutely not a good look against a promoted team. You mentioned, to wing backs Rice and Svensson. I've been really, really impressed with the two of them throughout the entire season. Whether it's tiredness sneaking in, I don't know. I think that's an issue that we can get onto, given the amount of games, particularly away games, that they've had. But you mentioned you think that Emre Can was maybe at fault for the marking in the middle for the header. I think another issue is a decision made by Ryerson, I think it's on the right, when he failed to block the cross. It's a good run from Dompe to sort of fake an overlap before Muheim crosses it in. But that overlap, he absolutely does Ryerson, because Ryerson goes to him, and it's that late in the game that all he can do is hang out a really tired-looking left leg to try and block the cross, and he gets nowhere near it. So the cross is able to come in. That cross probably shouldn't come in at all, to be honest, at that point, but it does, and then it takes its course. Yeah, maybe it is an element of tiredness, which brings me on to the fixture list. This was their 7th away game in 8 or 6th away game in 7 in their current run. It's been a very, very tough run. Bayern Munich away, Copenhagen away, then only the Cologne game at home, and then since then they've had Frankfurt away in the Cup on the Tuesday, then onto the Friday night away at Augsburg, then Manchester City in the week, then up to Hamburg. It has been a tough run, which is why I think I think a lot of people were maybe forgiving them for the relatively uninspirational performances and 1-0 wins against Cologne, against in Augsburg. That was particularly unspectacular. But it was like, okay, as long as that Kovac football is bringing the results in, particularly given the fixture list, I think that's acceptable. Obviously, it's a predictable narrative, isn't it? As soon as that doesn't happen, as soon as you draw 1-1 away and you're the promoted team, then the questions start getting asked. I don't know where I stand on it yet. If the question is, are they in trouble? I think, like Manu sort of said, no, I don't think they are in trouble. I think that's probably taking it too far. But this probably was an issue that was coming. Absolutely. And not just because of the situation Dortmund are in, and the sort of squad that they have this year, also coming off the back of the Club World Cup. I wonder if this is maybe the first example that we're seeing of a team belatedly seeing the effects of that Club World Cup. We actually said that in a weird way, Bayern and Dortmund seem to benefit from coming straight off the back of a competitive pre-season. In that sense, maybe this is an issue where the fixture list is catching up with them. Who knows? But even in the more longer term, in terms of Niko Kovac, we do know this is how we operate. And I'm not going to say that history's repeating itself, and this is exactly what we saw at Bayern, and you can't get the creativity out of the players. He's purely a defensive coach. I'm not going to go so far just yet, but it's an easy jump to make and to start those discussions. They're always going to hover around Niko Kovac. I I think I would, I don't think they're in trouble at the moment. They're looking all right in the Champions League. Had they got that over the line in Hamburg, they would have been second. I think I'm right in saying, particularly with Red Bull losing. Obviously frustrating from a Dortmund point of view that they've not capitalised on teams around them dropping points. But that's not even just a Niko Kovac problem, is it? That's been a Borussia Dortmund problem for years.
Yeah, it has, and you could probably make an argument that this fixture last year they would have found a way to lose it, especially in a away game. So I suppose there has been some improvement made there in some regard. But I mean, Manu, we do have to move on. But before we do all that, I'll jump back into you. But see if you have any final points on Dortmund, because I know you've kind of spoke a lot this season about the teams that have played in the Club World Cup and how there might be a kind of uniform kind of theory about them all, or a pattern beginning to emerge with them. But just to kind of add to what Matt said there about the away games, it's also the fifth consecutive Bundesliga game where they've only scored one goal. And I've got like their XG for and XG against in front of me, and I reckon in the last 5 games, their cumulative XG and XG against, their total would probably be a negative number. And that's not just because they played Bayern. They were negative against Leipzig, they were negative against Augsburg, and as Matt correctly said, they only had one shot on goal against Hamburg. So they had an XG of 1 and Hamburg had an XG of 0.6. So that was very, very narrow as well. So aside from a few chances against Cologne, they've really struggled in the last 5 days. And,
Just on that note with the expected goals as well, I read a stat earlier today that from Borussia Dortmund's 16 competitive games in all competitions this season, they've only had, apparently, an expected goals value of more than 2 on 2 occasions from 16 competitive games.
That makes
But
sense. I've just got... Sorry, man, I'll let you jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that I don't think we're at the point yet where maybe the Club World Cup is the big issue. I think it's the lack of creativity in the attack. And whether the Club World Cup is the factor here, I don't know, because it's not like they're the team that covers the most distance in this league, right? One of them is Bayern Munich. But I think I'm be more concerned about that. Now, of course, you could say sometimes the lack of creativity comes when teams have played a lot of games, right? Bastian Schweinsteiger spoke about that once, how the legs, when they feel heavy, you just go through the motions. You might be still able to cover distance and etc., but the head isn't clear. So maybe that's a thing. But I don't know if that is necessarily true, because you look at the other teams that were in the competition, they're able to still create creative moments, and we can now look back at Borussia Dortmund over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, where everything works but the goal scoring or the goal scoring creation, right? As you guys pointed out for the XG. So I'm not saying you're wrong, Matt. I just wonder if it's maybe too early to point your finger on that specific issue. Having said that, we're getting an issue about a question about Bayern Munich, and this was the first time this week where we could sort of see the games catching up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just to kind of wrap it up then, because to try and answer Gatham's question, he says, are Dortmund in trouble? I think we're all saying, not really, maybe. Is it a coaching problem or just personnel?
Not yet, but they have to. They have to get out of this rut. But maybe that'll come with a return to. I think that like 7 of their next 8 games or something ridiculous at home. Their fixture list is completely topsy turvy. So maybe that'll help them a bit.
Yeah, although they do come home to play Leverkusen. I've just closed the screen so I don't have it in front of me, but it's Leverkusen, someone, and then Hoffenheim. So it's 3 decent sides.
Stuttgart as well, they've got.
Stuttgart, Leverkusen, that's what it is. Stuttgart, Leverkusen, and Hoffenheim. So 3 good games. So, and then Gotham asks, how can he improve their defence? I'd say find a way for Guirassy not to play for his national team over the international break and then put his feet up for a week. That might do a lot of good. Same with Adeyemi, perhaps. But we digress. We move on.